So, here I am, sitting in my favorite cafe with my overpriced latte, thinking about how life throws curveballs. I'd been attending these swing parties for a few months now. It started as a curiosity, something I could chalk up to a quarter-life crisis, but it quickly became a guilty pleasure. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't just about the spicy side. The people were fun, the vibe was freeing, and there was something about the mix of casual and risque that made me feel alive. Besides, everyone was consenting, respectful, and surprisingly classy. But this story is different. Let me rewind to 2 weeks ago. The party was at a gorgeous house on the edge of town, one of those suburban mansions that looks like it belongs on the cover of a real estate magazine. When I arrived, the usual atmosphere greeted me. Dim lights, soft music, and a mix of people chatting like they were at an upscale cocktail event. I spotted Alex almost immediately. He was a regular, tall, handsome, with this effortless charm that made him the center of attention in any room. Things were going great, and before I knew it, I was spending most of the night with Alex. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, even though everyone was clearly vying for his attention. It was fun, exciting, and a little intoxicating, figuratively and literally, thanks to the bottomless champagne. Then came the incident. Let's just say things were getting steamy when I suddenly felt something unusual. A weird sensation at my waist. Sticky and warm. My brain short-circuited. Oh no, I thought. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. But as I glanced down, my worst fears were confirmed. Yup, Alex had, lost control of his mayonnaise. And not in the fun, romantic way you might read about in a spicy romance novel. No, this was messy and entirely unplanned. Panic. Alex! I yelled, jumping up like I'd been electrocuted. He looked mortified, mumbling apologies as I scrambled to grab my things. It wasn't just the mess, it was the sheer unpreparedness of it all. I'm not one to shy away from these situations, but this was a whole new level of unexpected. I bolted out of there faster than you can say awkward, barely pausing to grab my purse. My first stop. Pharmacy. Birth control pills, I needed them stat. And trust me, nothing screams fun Saturday night like standing in line at 2 a.m., frantically Googling emergency contraception effectiveness. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to convince myself I was fine. It's nothing, I told myself. The pills worked. Everything's under control. But no matter how much I tried to push it out of my mind, a tiny voice kept nagging at me. What if the pills didn't work? What if I was pregnant? And then there was another worry, one that I hadn't let myself fully think about until now. Swing parties were supposed to be safe spaces, but how safe was this really? I hadn't seen Alex grab a condom, and now I couldn't shake the lingering fear of something worse, HIV. This brings me to today. I'm sitting in the waiting room of my doctor's office, my foot bouncing nervously as I wait for my name to be called. The plan is simple. Take a pregnancy test, get tested for HIV, and get some clarity. But honestly, I'm terrified. If it's positive, either test, my life could change forever. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that. But hey, what's life without a little chaos, right? Sitting on that cold exam table felt like an eternity. My doctor walked in with a calm smile, but all I could think about was what she was holding. That small envelope. My entire future might as well have been stuffed inside. I clenched my hands, silently praying that this nightmare would turn out to be just an overreaction from my melodramatic mind. She started with a reassuring tone, the kind doctors use when they're about to give you either really good news or absolutely shattering news. First, she said, the pregnancy test. My heart stopped. It's negative. I exhaled so sharply I'm pretty sure I startled the poor woman. Oh my God, thank you, I blurted out, relief washing over me like a tidal wave. No baby. No awkward phone calls to Alex. No sleepless nights trying to explain to my mother how her daughter's life went off the rails. But then her expression changed. Just slightly, but enough to make my stomach knot up again. However, she continued, her voice softer now. We also ran an HIV test given your concerns. Came back positive. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I stared at her, waiting for her to say, "Just kidding. That was a mix-up." But no, it didn't. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and impossible to ignore. Positive. It didn't feel real. How could it? I'd always been careful, or at least I thought I had been. My mind flashed back to every party, every careless moment when I'd trusted that everyone was on the same page about safety. And then, inevitably, back to Alex. Was it him? Or someone else? Or maybe this had nothing to do with the parties at all. My brain spiraled with questions, each one more suffocating than the last. "Are you okay?" my doctor asked, her voice a lifeline trying to tether me back to reality. Yeah, I lied, even though my throat felt like it was closing up. "What do I do now?" She explained the next steps. Follow-up tests, treatment options, support groups. The usual spiel. And while she spoke, I nodded like a robot, all the while feeling like I was watching someone else's life crumble from the outside. The drive home was a blur. I barely remember getting in my car, let alone navigating through traffic. By the time I made it back to my apartment, I was emotionally drained and physically shaking. I collapsed onto my couch and stared at the ceiling, letting the tears fall. It wasn't the kind of dramatic, movie-worthy cry where you wail into a pillow. No, it was the quiet, gut-wrenching kind, where every sob feels like it's being pulled out of you by force. I replayed the last few months in my head over and over. How had I let this happen? What could I have done differently? I'd been so busy chasing adventure, pushing boundaries, and living my so-called best life that I hadn't stopped to think about the risks. And now here I was paying the price. Eventually my phone buzzed, pulling me out of my spiral. It was a text from Chloe, my best friend and the only person who knew about my party-going escapades. "Chloe. Hey babe, how'd the doctor's visit go? Everything okay?" I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Did I tell her? Did I keep it to myself? The idea of saying it out loud, even to her, felt terrifying. But the thought of keeping it bottled up inside felt worse. Finally, I typed back. "Can I come over? I need to talk." Her reply was almost instant. "Of course. Wine's already waiting." And just like that, I had a plan. For now, at least. I take it one step at a time, starting with telling Chloe. Because if there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that I couldn't face this alone. Let me tell you, walking up to Chloe's apartment that evening felt like marching to my own execution. I could hear the faint hum of her music through the door, some upbeat pop song that didn't match my mood at all. For a second, I thought about turning around and pretending I'd never texted her. Maybe I could handle this on my own. Maybe if I ignored it long enough, it would just go away. But no, that wasn't how life worked. My fingers shook as I knocked. Chloe opened the door almost instantly, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. She was dressed in yoga pants and an oversized hoodie, holding a half-full wine glass. "Babe, you look like you've been through it," she said, ushering me inside. "Drink." I sank onto her couch, gripping the glass she handed me like it was a lifeline. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She just watched me, waiting. Chloe was always like that. Patient, never pushing, but somehow managing to pry the truth out of you anyway. Finally, I blurted it out. "I'm not pregnant." Her face lit up, and she let out a relieved laugh. "Well, thank God for that. I mean, not that you couldn't handle a baby, but—" "I have HIV, I interrupted. The words hung in the air like a grenade. Chloe's smile froze, and for a second, I thought she might laugh it off as a bad joke. But then she saw my face. Her wine glass hit the table with a soft clink as she moved closer, her hand landing on mine. "Wait, what? How?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. I shook my head, the tears welling up again. "I don't know, Chloe. I do. It was one of the parties. Probably Alex." Saying his name felt like swallowing glass. I don't know how I was so stupid. I wasn't thinking. Hey, she said, pulling me into a hug before I could dissolve completely. "You're not stupid. You were living your life. This is not your fault." Her words were comforting, but they didn't stop the guilt from clawing at my insides. I should have been more careful, I muttered into her hoodie. I thought I was being careful. She pulled back, looking me square in the eye. Listen to me. You cannot do this to yourself. What's done is done, okay? Now we figure out what's next. What's next? I repeated, my voice cracking. Chloe, my whole life just flipped upside down. I don't even know where to start. Start by not shutting yourself off from the world, she said. You've got me, you've got a doctor, and you've got options. This doesn't define you. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But all I could think about was how my life was never going to be the same. The parties. Over. My casual, carefree lifestyle. Every decision I'd made in the last few months now felt like a chain of dominoes leading to this one catastrophic moment. Do you hate me? I asked suddenly, my voice barely above a whisper. Chloe frowned. Why would I hate you? For being reckless. For putting myself in this position. She grabbed my hand again, squeezing it tightly. I don't hate you. Love you. And if you want to blame someone, blame the guy who didn't think twice about putting you at risk. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Alex. The thought of confronting him made my stomach churn, but Chloe was right. He deserved to know, or at least I deserved to say my piece. You think I should tell him? Yes. She nodded. You don't have to do it tonight or tomorrow, but yeah, he needs to know. And you need closure. Closure. The word felt foreign, like something from a self-help book I'd scoff at in the checkout line. But maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't just about the diagnosis. Maybe it was about reclaiming control of my life, one terrifying step at a time. Chloe refilled my glass and handed it back to me. First, though, we finish this wine and binge some trash TV. Baby steps, okay? I managed a weak smile. Okay. We spent the rest of the night laughing at reality TV contestants and stuffing our faces with leftover Chinese takeout. It was the most normal I'd felt in weeks. For a few hours I could almost forget. But as I drove home later, the weight of what I had to do settled over me like a storm cloud. Tomorrow I'd call Alex. And then, well, I'd figure it out from there. The next morning, I woke up to the blaring sound of my phone alarm. It felt too early to face the mess I'd created, but life wasn't waiting for me to catch up. I'd promised myself I'd call Alex, and Chloe's pep talk echoed in my head. Reclaim control. Get closure. Easy to say when you're not about to confront the guy who inadvertently flipped your life upside down. I stared at my phone, fingers hovering over his contact. Just do it, I muttered to myself, hitting the call button before I could chicken out. The phone rang. Once. On the third ring he picked up. Hey you, Alex's voice came through, warm and casual like nothing had happened. Froze. What was I supposed to say? Oh hi Alex. Quick update. Remember that party 2 weeks ago? Well, turns out you left me with a little surprise. You there? He asked, his tone shifting. Yeah, I'm here, I blurted. Listen, we need to talk. In person. It's important. Alex hesitated. Is everything okay? Oh, it's not. My voice cracked, but I held it together. Can you meet me at the cafe on 5th? Noon. Yeah, sure, he said, sounding genuinely concerned. I'll be there. I hung up, my hands trembling. The rest of the morning was a blur of pacing, mentally rehearsing the conversation, and trying not to throw up. By the time I arrived at the cafe, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. Alex was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 steaming coffees. He stood when he saw me, his smile faltering at the sight of my face. You look stressed, he said, pulling out a chair for me. Thanks, I muttered, sitting down and clasping my hands tightly on the table. Listen, Alex. I'm just going to say it. His eyebrows knitted together, concern etched across his face. Okay. Got tested. After the last party, I began, my voice shaking. I found out I'm HIV positive. For a moment, he just stared at me, his face a mask of shock. What? He finally said, leaning back in his chair. I don't even know what to say. I don't need you to say anything, I said quickly. I just thought you should know. I need to know if you knew. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with indignation. You think I'd knowingly do that to someone? Are you serious? I don't know, Alex. I shot back, my voice louder than I intended. A few heads turned, but I didn't care. I don't know anything anymore. I just know this happened, and I'm dealing with it alone. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly shaken. I swear to God I didn't know. I've been tested, I'm clean. He paused, his voice softening. I'm so sorry this happened to you. But it wasn't me. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. If it wasn't him, then who? My mind reeled, racing through faces and moments from the past few months. There was no way to know for sure. The thought made me feel sick. I need to get tested now, Alex said, snapping me out of my spiral. Just to be sure. Will you come with me? I blinked at him. What? To the clinic, he said. Uday. Let's go. We arrived at the clinic together, the awkward tension between us palpable. The waiting room was sterile and quiet, filled with nervous energy. Alex filled out his paperwork in silence, and I tried not to fidget. When his name was called, he looked at me. You coming? I hesitated. You don't need me there. I do, he said simply. So I followed him. The nurse was kind, explaining the process with a practiced ease that didn't do much to calm either of us. As she drew Alex's blood, he winced but didn't complain. How long until I know, he asked. A few days, she replied. We'll call you with the results. The ride back to his place was quiet, the air between us heavy with unspoken thoughts. When we finally pulled into his driveway, he turned to me. Look, I don't know where we go from here, but I'm not going to leave you hanging. If you need someone, I'm here. His words were sincere, but they didn't fix the gaping hole in my chest. Still, I nodded. Thanks, Alex. As I drove home, I realized something. This wasn't just about Alex or the parties or even the diagnosis. It was about me. The choices I'd made, the risks I'd taken, and the life I wanted moving forward. I couldn't change the past, but I could decide how to handle the future. Over the next few weeks, I started treatment. Chloe came to every appointment, her unwavering support keeping me afloat. I cut ties with the swing party scene not because I blamed it entirely, but because I needed to focus on myself for a while. And slowly I started to rebuild. One night, as I sat on my couch with Chloe and a bowl of popcorn, she nudged me. You okay? I thought about it for a moment. I think so, I said. And for the first time in weeks, I actually meant it. It's funny how life doesn't stop for you, even when it feels like your world has crumbled. Bills still need to be paid, laundry still piles up, and work emails keep pinging relentlessly. For weeks, I felt like I was just going through the motions. Mail. Nod. Pretend everything's fine. But under the surface, I was figuring out how to live with my new reality. Alex got his test results back a few days after our visit to the clinic. Negative. A part of me felt relief for him. He didn't deserve this, but another part of me spiraled. If it wasn't Alex, then who? My mind kept circling back to all the what-ifs, but the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. I couldn't change what happened. What I could do was take control of what came next. That's how I found myself at a local support group one Wednesday evening. Chloe had insisted, practically dragging me out of my apartment and threatening to withhold wine if I didn't go. The meeting was in a small community center, the kind of place that smelled faintly of old coffee and floor polish. I walked in, scanning the room filled with people chatting quietly. They looked normal, happy even. It wasn't the doom and gloom atmosphere I'd expected. A woman with kind eyes and a calming voice introduced herself as Beth and asked if I'd like to share. My first instinct was to shrink into my chair and shake my head, but then I remembered why I was there. So I talked. I told them about the parties, about Alex, about the diagnosis. I told them about the guilt, the anger, and the fear that had swallowed me whole. And when I was done, Beth smiled and said, "You're not alone." It was such a simple thing, but it hit me hard. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. Fast forward to now, and my life looks a little different. I'm still me, sarcastic, curious, prone to making impulsive decisions, but I've learned to slow down. I've learned to breathe. The swing parties are a thing of the past. Not because I regret them entirely, but because they were a chapter that served its purpose. They taught me about freedom, about connection, and yes, about consequences. I wouldn't trade those lessons for anything. Alex and I stayed in touch, though things between us never really went back to normal. He checks in sometimes and I appreciate it, but we've both moved on. Chloe, as always, is my rock. She jokes that she's due for sainthood after putting up with me through all of this. She's not wrong. And me. I've found a new rhythm. Treatment has become part of my routine, something I don't even think about most days. I've met people through the support group who've turned into real friends, people who understand what I'm going through in a way no one else could. There are still hard days, of course. Days when I wonder what my life would look like if I'd made different choices. But those days are fewer now, and they don't last as long. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're so much more than the worst thing that's ever happened to us. Tonight, Chloe and I are sitting on her balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. She raises her glass and says, "To surviving the chaos." To surviving, I agree, clinking my glass against hers. For the first time in a long time I feel light. Free. The road ahead isn't perfect, but it's mine to navigate. And that's more than enough.